Hi, I'm Art Chantry, and this is For My Sake.
Like, how did you get into graphic design, or how did graphic design get into you?
Wow. You know, I got into graphic design because I collected comic books. Mad Magazine, Marvel Comics, I collected all that stuff, Monster magazines. And then it was a natural transition into record covers. I remember record covers, the psychedelic record covers, Cal Schenkel's covers for the Mothers of Invention. I really, I saw that and something kind of clicked. And I started trying to draw my own record covers and comic book heroes like all those other geeks out there. And I just kept going. And then I discovered psychedelic posters and I just tried to do those. And this is how I was a kid. American trash culture is where I learned graphic design. TV shows, I watched lots of TV, comic books, just crap.
So
that's where it came from.
What was the first thing that was considered graphic design for you? Like, what was the first project you worked on, and how did you get it?
The first paying gig I had, it was in high school.
Really?
Yeah, I was basically, making psychedelic type. I don't know if you have Peaches out here, but Peaches are like these cheap paper folder things with pictures on them that you buy for $0.25. And it was a fad back then to carry these things around. And what people would do is carry them and then tape them back together and put stickers on them and write on them and graffiti them. And the idea was to try and keep one going all year until it just looked like a nightmare. And they became works of art. And it was a popular thing to, doodle on them. And I spent a lot of time writing psychedelic interlocking type, or my version of it. And a guy actually hired me, paid me $5 to write his girlfriend's name on his Peachy for him. And that led into another guy who was starting a guitar building shop. I mean, he was just a kid who liked to build guitars and was teaching himself. And I did a logo for him, which he never used, but he paid me $25. And then here I am. It's so easy.
Simple.
Yeah.
You said logo, which reminds me of something I read online that was, you thought logos could be unnecessary now. Because I think you used Target as an example of they built this huge corporation off of something as simple as that.
Yeah.
Cliche.
Well, I mean, that's actually a successful logo, but it pre-existed their whole design as commodity campaign. So, I mean, it was around for years prior to that. I think logos are kind of overused to the point of ridiculousness.
Yeah.
I mean, oftentimes when I design a logo now for a company, I might design 20 or 30 ideas, and generally I tell them to use them all. And it works really well because they're cool looking and people notice them. Logos really have lost their meaning if everybody's got their own specialized logo. I know people who have dogs who have their own logos at this point.
That makes me think another thing that you had said was, I think you're referencing David Carson and called him that he did anti-graphics.
Well, yeah, he was a punk dude. He was a counterculture dude. For those who don't know who David Carson is, David Carson back in the 90s, we all know him as the designer from Ray Gun magazine, but his design style completely turned graphic design upside down. It was his timing was perfect. He did this look that could be done on computers, and he did it really well, and everybody looked at it and said, I can do that too, and the entire world of graphic design as we knew it did this shift on its axis. He had no idea that. One thing about Carson that I've noticed over the years is he can't articulate his ideas. He's an instinct designer and he works from the gut, and he's like an old surfer dude, an old punk dude. He used to be the 6th-rate surfer in the world at one point. And when he started doing graphic design, he really wasn't trained. He started doing it. He was teaching 6th grade classes on art and stuff, and then he started doing some stuff in skateboard magazines because he was a skateboarder too. And because he didn't really know what he was doing it all at once. If a mistake came out from the typesetting machine, the thing was all screwed up, he'd use that. If something was torn, he'd use that. If it was upside down, it'd stay put. And it was basically, one of the things he told me back then when he was working, there was this initial magazine, after he did the skateboarding magazine called Trans World Skateboard, he worked on a magazine called Beach Culture. It lasted 6 issues. It was paid for by a benefactor who wanted to do this magazine wanted David Carson to do it. And he basically defined all his ideas in these 6 issues. And from that point on, he's been imitating himself. And the whole world has been imitating his imitations. But during that period of time, we had a correspondence because he was a fan of some of my stuff. And we'd write back and forth and ask each other stupid questions. And he sent me a layout that was like he did something in the magazine where he had a column of typography, just lettering, text. And it went right over the gutter, right over the fold. Except that wasn't a fold, there were staples there. You know how those things slide together and they staple them? Yeah. You can't do that. It was 9x10 type, it was fine type. The slightest shift in the bindery, which is really unavoidable, and it would be illegible. And I looked at that, I wrote him, I said, you can't do that. He wrote me back, he says, yeah, I know, it's on my list, that's why I did it. And apparently he had a list of the rules of graphic design.
And this is the one I'm breaking today.
Yes. Well, his goal was to try and break as many of those rules in everything he did.
Wow.
And he got it from some design class, you know, that some teacher's handout, the rules of graphic design, never mix typefaces, you know, that kind of stuff. Always use Helvetica. And so he just went about trying to just screw that up every chance he got. Pure punk rock. Anti-graphics. He took the rules of graphic design, he just said, tossed them all out. He did anti. It isn't tossing out and reinventing. He really took the rules and turned them upside down and worked with that system. And the world of graphic design shifted on its axis right there. He was like the first real punk rock mainstream designer.
And I feel that that's where your design falls in, also the anti-graphic kind of stuff. So it's like, how do you...
I'm more like anti-culture. I mean, my design ideas come from trash culture, American trash culture, the stuff that... There was a period of time I worked as a garbage man, and I'm still using stuff I found, and that's pretty obvious, you know? And I'm fascinated by things that have been printed, discarded, then picked back up, things that have been used. I wanted to be an archaeologist at one time, and I'm kind of doing kind of a graphic design version of archaeology. I take this old material, you know, collage, montage, things like that. I take old material and I recombine it and put it into different contexts and tack different meanings onto it and redefine it and then represent it to the culture so that it gets confusing. And that's, like for instance, this piece here. You know, Gasoline is a Japanese rock band, Japanese punk band. Well, sort of a garage rock band. It's hard to define. What are these terms? What's the difference between punk and garage anyway? I don't know.
I don't think there's a difference.
Time frame? I don't know. These guys have the most wretched guitar sound. These guys, they don't know how to tune their guitars, and it's just beautiful. There's nothing like a really wretched guitar to make my heart pound. And they're great. That's actually Elvis Presley. That's a photograph of Elvis Presley that I lifted out of the Tacoma News Tribune from 1956 when he played in Tacoma. I found a copy of this. There's this wonderful photo of Elvis slouching in front of the microphone. I go, now there's a rock and roll stance. And because Elvis is dead, I put a skull on it. Yeah.
For the time.
You know, Take It to the People was the name of the record. When the Japanese say take it to the people, it means something totally different than what we do. You know, and so you start throwing these little counter jokes, the past, the present, the future, Japan versus America, and pop culture.
You get all these layers.
And it just gets confused. Yeah. The idea is to create the confusion and meaning comes out of it. When the Surrealists did dream imagery, they would take literally random imagery, throw it down next to each other, and just let the mind make the associations. And that would become the meaning of the piece. That's not too different than what this is. This is a little more focused. The material I'm working with is more directly involved with the subject matter at hand. I mean, this would be totally inappropriate for Apple computers.
Right.
But for a band like Gasoline, that level of dream imagery starts to just make sense. It becomes iconographic.
So do you find people telling you the story of your posters and you're like, I didn't even do that on purpose?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like,
oh God, yes.
Like, oh, this meaning must be...
Well, when you get to the level of meanings, it gets really interesting. I did one poster back in the early 90s. I call it my tool poster. But what it was is a calendar for an arts event series called the Center on Contemporary Arts. And it was performance art pieces. And I was really fascinated by old industrial graphics from the 40s and 50s, American industrial graphics. I was just, that was like really cool. And I started playing with the imagery and trying to figure out this language form, this dialect of graphic design. And I applied it to this poster. So basically I turned the season calendar into an ad for tools, you know. And it hung around town. It was one of those posters that when it showed up, nobody had ever done anything quite like that before, and everybody just kind of went, they're totally boggled by it. It actually made ripples throughout graphic design. People wrote articles about it. Steve Heller wrote an article called The Cult of the Ugly, and this was like one of the pieces they talked about. And you know, ugly is just another tool. I mean, graphic designers can use ugly, pretty, blue, red, and it's all this, these are words in our vocabulary. Well, I did that poster and it went out. It got in better reviews. Every performance piece came out, they'd review the performance and then you start talking about my poster. You know, it's like it got better reviews than the actual art presented. It was hilarious. But since that time, I've had 4 people come up to me. Totally different walks of life, different places, you know. Saw this poster and they come up to me and said, you know, seeing that poster changed my life. Thank you. And it's like, what on earth are you talking about? And they'd tell me things like, well, I saw this poster and I saw what you were doing and I understood what you were doing and I realized that if you could do that, I could do this. And they went that way and they had a different life. You know, it's just, when you start getting into that kind of level, it kind of notches up. We're dealing, I like to think of myself as like working with culture rather than design. This is the visual language that we all understand, but we don't know we understand. And when I'm putting this stuff out there, I'm manipulating the viewer. Obviously it's an advert. Go see this band at this place at this time, you know? That's what that is. It's not a piece of artwork. It's an advert. But after the event's over, you know, Pearl Jam will eventually break up and may even get forgotten someday. It's, you know, awfully famous band to be forgotten. But that poster is still going to be there, and it's still not a piece of art. It's still an advertisement. So where does it fit in our cultural definitions? You know, is that art? Is that an ad?
Well, it's becoming art, though, isn't it?
No, it's not. It's an artifact. It's an artifact. You know, when they pull out those religious paintings like the Sistine Chapel, that's actually a religious artifact that happened to be using art as its medium. See? That's what I'm doing here. And so when you start stepping into that world, you know, you become extremely powerful. And people want to hire you to manipulate the viewers. It's people like us that put like Ronald Reagan into power, George Bush into office, their advertising campaigns. There's a guy named Michael Deaver. He just died recently, a few years back, but he was the guy who built and masterminded Ronald Reagan's presidential run. And he was like one of the best graphic design advertising guys in California history before he started on that campaign. And he's the guy that tricked America into Ronald Reagan. And the whole culture shifted. That's the level of power that this stuff actually starts to step into.
Then we forget.
Obviously, when I'm doing it for a band called Gasoline, it ain't Ronald Reagan. But I mean, it's that territory.
Right.
And that's why this is such interesting stuff to us as artifact. My goal is to create stuff that 100 years from now people still look at and see interesting stuff, maybe hang on their wall, discuss, contemplate, you know, for a band that broke up 80 years ago, that has been forgotten, you know, printed in styles that were period styles from confusing places. That's the goal. Create an artifact that survives beyond. So you see, I'm not working as an artist at all. I'm not an artist. I'm a graphic designer. Totally different. That's like confusing a dentist with a surgeon, you know. If you want some brain surgery, don't hire your dentist. You know, be careful about that. It's just like if you want artwork, don't hire a graphic designer, for Christ's sakes. You know, it's just really stupid. And never hire an artist to do your graphic design. That's even dumber. I wouldn't want a brain surgeon working on my teeth, you know?
So I think that your artwork has that edge that I don't know if we see so much anymore. Do you feel like graphic design's lost its edge or its ability to kind of...
I think what's happened is graphic design has changed in the last 10 years because of the advent of the internet and computers. Graphic design has shifted from a craft or an art form, perchance, and become like a technological activity. You buy the software and you're a graphic designer. I know so many graphic designers that they think a design education is learning how to use the software and that's it, which is like a painter deciding to learn how to paint by just learning how to smear pigment on canvas.
And that's all you need.
Yeah, I mean, that's all you need to be a painter. No, it's a much more complicated thing. Right. But as far as those programs go, it's good enough to produce B-level graphic design. Anybody can. So what's happened is it's kind of turned everything upside down and thrown graphic design into the hands of the proletariat. And the result is we're going through the mosh. Everybody is a graphic designer if they only have the time. Remember when you used to see guys walking down the streets and they wore berets and dark glasses and goatees and they had portfolio cases? They were artists. Now they're graphic designers. They're all graphic designers. Nobody wants to be an artist. Everyone wants to be a graphic designer because it's easy. But it's not.
I think.
Yeah, but it's not. So when you say that it's changing, it really is. It's become a mass dialogue. And out of that will come amazing things, but it's going to take a while to go through that learning curve. Who would have guessed that? When I started out in this business, I did very precise, very delicate, very beautiful. I mean, I was like legendary for how good my work was as far as my production on the mechanicals, the actual physical board art.
Parkland College is a great way for you to start your career. Don was a great inspiration for me. He was not only my teacher, he was a friend.
During the time that she was there, she developed very good skills in my drawing and watercolor classes. We got to be very good friends as well. We saw her confidence in her own ability grow, which is extremely important for an art student or a creative person.
I had a great experience and I loved it and I recommend it to anyone.
You're dealing with style, you're dealing with fashion. This is like in that realm. But it's also got its foot in another world. I mean, posters are odd that way because they're like the closest thing a graphic designer does to real art. It looks like a painting because it's about the same size.
Right.
In fact, posters are one of the few things art museums will collect that a graphic designer does because they look like paintings. And before they collect them, they mount them on canvas.
Right.
And it's like,
put up like this.
yeah.
Duct tape.
Oh, they should have duct tape and put it in,
Cardboard.
wheat paste. That's their proper environment.
Exactly.
It should be on a telephone
Like
pole.
layered with other posters from other bands.
So when you
'cause
take these
everybody's
things,
competing.
when you take an artifact and place it on a white wall, it becomes an objet d'art. Is that how you pronounce that?
I don't know.
And that's just silly, but that's what we do in our culture. We take. The time will come where this will be in an art museum and people will go,
Well, if it
oh,
has this cover top on it, definitely.
and it talks. So that it talks. I am a coffee cup.
I am art.
So I mean, those kind of jokes. I mean, when you get to something like this, we got a joke about. I mean, that's printed on wallpaper samples. Every single poster was printed on a different. I basically clipped them out of those wallpaper books. You go to a Home Depot, they have these books full of wallpaper. Basically, got a bunch of them out of dumpsters, cut the pages on, and silkscreened on. So every one of them was different, yet everyone was the same. And it looks like it's a hand busting out of a wall. That's actually a commentary on what a poster is. Is it art? Is it just a piece of wallpaper? The hand's busting out, and it's basically saying, well, to hell with that. This is me trying to talk to you and sell you something. Come now. And of course, the words "idiot flesh" are the name of the band. Who is that?
You're gonna quiz me on video?
No, that's Neil Cassidy. Nobody knows that
Well, why?
because nobody knows what he looks like. He was the guy Jack Kerouac was writing about. He was the guy on the road. He is like one of the most famous American iconographic people of the last century, and nobody really knows what he looks like. He was a speed freak. Most of these guys are speed freaks. And you can see how skinny and horrible he was. But he had this sledgehammer that he carried with him, and he'd twirl it up in the air. When he drove the bus for the Merry Pranksters back in the hippie era, he basically spent all his time in the garage flipping this sledgehammer and catching it. And that's what he did because he was all cranked out all the time. So this is a poster that's,
Should we do with a sledgehammer?
it's basically an homage to Neil Cassidy and his sledgehammer.
Nice. Okay, so what is the strangest thing you've ever worked on? Since you probably have a nice group of
God.
interesting. I know you have a million stories.
So many strange things I've worked on. I mean, if you want to do interesting graphic design, you got to have interesting clients.
Right.
So my clients are like, punk rockers. And ask me another deep, profound question about relevance and reality.
What?
Well, that's what you were asking over there. You still haven't pointed out something timeless.
Timeless.
No, that's just old-fashioned.
I'm going to point out everything I think is timeless, and you'll have a better word for it.
Damn straight. I've played this game before.
Nice.
Well, graphic design is kind of a game. I remember watching Milton Glaser talk. And he was on a panel, And there's all these famous graphic designers and writers about graphic design on this panel, and they were all discussing some profound topic of the moment that I forget because it faded away. But at one point, Milton Glaser, in the middle of this heated discussion about what we do and everything, he finally says, "It's time we got honest here. Graphic design is about power." And the whole audience went silence for it. It's just like, what a weird thing to say. And they all thought about it and they all got quiet. Because we're the guys who empower the brokers out there. We are the ones that allow those guys to speak to the population. When we use yellow, we're saying something. We use like a scuzzy, dirty line like that, or we use a square or a circle. All these things have meaning in our culture, and we're using that to manipulate the viewer into, in this case, go to this concert. And it could be buy this product, it could be vote for this candidate. And it's how we get at the monkey brains. We're that powerful. We are the interpreters of power. Propagandists.
That's going to go straight to my head.
Yeah, you don't want that.
How do you avoid that?
You don't. No, you don't avoid it. You can't avoid it. You just have to be aware of it and listen to your heart as well as your head. Most graphic designers really approach this stuff as strictly business, and they just do it for the money. And money is all it's about. You talk to most graphic designers about the kind of stuff I'm talking about, and they get really upset. They really do, because they're not. I've had people start yelling at me just because the idea that we're actually helping power brokers manipulate the public as a concept so offends them, because they have these highfalutin ideas that they've learned about what we do. I'm an artist. I'm not a propagandist. Right. So it's like these are like really heresy kinds of concepts in graphic design. But as graphic design changes, as everything else changes, as the definitions of what we do change, it's like people are beginning to wise up. It's now being assumed that we are propagandists, whereas in the past it would have been heresy to say that. So,
could you talk a little bit about screen printing? Because I think a lot of kids
screen printing.
Don't know it anymore.
Screen printing is one of the oldest forms of printing. It predates offset and letterpress. It doesn't predate potato stamps, though. That's actually oldest. And
because you get such a different look out of it. It's such like.
What's nice about screen printing is that it's actually a mesh of. Well, it used to actually be made out of silk. That's why it was silk screen. When the Chinese started doing it millennia ago, you take this they call it ink, but it's really thick, goopy stuff. It looks like paint. And it's a solid, beautiful color. And you take what essentially is a squeegee, like the things you clean floors with or clean windows with, and you drag the edge of that squeegee down over the surface of that stenciled screen, and the ink goes through the mesh, the silk mesh, and sticks to the paper. So it's a very, very thick, solid coat of rich, beautiful color. That's very, very different than offset printing, which is a layering technique. Every one of these colors is a 100% solid color. Every one of these colors is like solid pigment, so it ends up being really vibrant and beautiful. And what's nice about it is you can literally print on anything. All these you can print on, but I mean, all those coffee mugs, all those campaign buttons, all those cars, everything.
Records.
You can literally silkscreen on it. You can silkscreen on, a squished pop can. You can literally silkscreen on that. So the idea is, it's like you can basically set up your own silkscreen in your own garage and print on anything you can find. And it's that simple. So it's like one of the great populous kinds of printing processes. It doesn't cost very much.
So for the process for actual designing different in your head? Because I'm
Yes,
thinking in
very
layers now.
different.
So how do you design when you're on a computer versus when you're doing something like a poster?
Computers are terrible production tools. I don't even design with computers. I design the old-fashioned way, thinking like a printing press. I think in terms of layers of ink. And I think in color, but I create the artwork in black and white, because each layer doesn't turn to color until it goes on the press and you pour on the colored ink. That's when it turns to color. So I tend to think in layers. When you think in terms of silkscreen, you think of opaque layers, ink you cannot see through, basically solid ink. When you're working with offset or regular printing presses, it's transparent ink. And you can see through it, and when you see through layers of ink, you print yellow on top of blue, you end up with green. And that's the basic premise of the two styles, is one is a transparent process and one is a solid ink. Silkscreen's easier to understand because each time you put down a layer, there it is. It's very satisfying, it's very direct, you can see exactly the results. When you're working in offset, you might not see what the final color is until, you have 4 colors of ink on the paper, and then all of a sudden it looks like green. And you go, oh, okay, now it's looking like I planned. So I mean, it's a more expensive process, the proofing takes longer. It's designed for much larger runs because it's all machines. You turn that thing on, and you have 5,000 copies, and then you start getting into a unit cost that makes sense. Silkscreen, you can print 5 copies and still be affordable. And that's a huge economic difference for the people who have money and the people who don't have money.
So do you still, I think you were talking a little bit about this morning when we got coffee, was that you would still maybe do something in Silkscreen, but if you needed to take it to a higher run, that's when you
Absolutely.
start scanning and doing, to get it to the digital side?
Well, because of the shift in production processes, print shops don't do production for you anymore. They don't have dark rooms, they don't have stat cameras. So for instance, I can't do a poster, do the artwork full size anymore. They used to be able to take that, put it on a production stat camera and process it and then print it full size. That artwork was done that size. But with computers, if you're not producing the image using digital technology exclusively, I have to scan my artwork. And scanners are only that big. So I have to do artwork that's tiny, and if I want it big, then I can do the production and make it big. Changes so much.
Everything.
Yeah. So I have to approach what I do from an entirely different point of view, technologically now. I think that's a shame, because I really have noticed a drop in quality in my work after that happened. Another thing that happened is that one thing that computers do extremely well is really clean artwork, things that's very precise and very delicate and very exacting, and it's very, part of the Christmas of it is part of the fad of the love of CG right now. That's the way it looks. But doing stuff that looks like this is really hard to do on a computer. This looks like crap. So every time technology takes a step forward, I take another step back, because this is like one of the few things people come to me to do because they can't do it themselves on a computer. Make their stuff look like crap. And so what happens is the whole notion of what is quality and what is good doesn't invert. All of a sudden, this is looked at as hand-done stuff, and therefore it's better than what you can do on a computer because it's art. It's like the definition takes another shift, So right now, I'm getting hired to do the crappiest work I've ever done in my life. And I'm getting paid the most money ever for it. And I'm not kidding. That's the way it works. Who would have guessed that? When I started out in this business, I did very precise, very delicate, very beautiful. I was like legendary for how good my work was as far as my production on the mechanicals, the actual physical board art. They used to show other people my mechanicals and show them, well, this is how you're supposed to do it, And nowadays, I'm getting hired to do stuff like this. And it's like, okay, there you go. Go figure that out. You just have to, it's like surfing sometimes. You just ride a wave. Yeah. Well, one of the nice things, though, is that I have pursued clients that allow me to do things like this. Imagine doing this for Coca-Cola. Mm-hmm. No, but imagine doing it for the Supersonic Soul Pimps. Okay, that makes sense. So all of a sudden, I've got clientele that speak the same language.
Have you been approached by a Coca-Cola kind of?
Oh yeah.
Like, we need to get to the youth. Can you do this for us?
Yes.
And
they have no idea what my stuff really looks like. They have an idea what art chantry I want it to look like. But what they're really thinking about is stuff maybe I did 5-6 years ago, because that's what they saw in the design books or something, and there's a time lag in there. So I might not be working in a style like this at all anymore. And they say, I want that art chantry look. And I have to start asking questions, well, what do you mean? What specific ideas do you have in mind for this art chantry look? I don't know what my look is, I just do what I do, And stylistically, there's a lot of big jumping around here. There's a look, but there isn't. It's confusing, There's just nothing predictable about any of this stuff. That's one of the cool things about graphic design too, as a career option, is you have no idea where you're going to end up. I had no idea I'd be doing this stuff. I get to do kid stuff, and I'm in my 50s. Think about that.
That's great.
It really, I'm very lucky, Start with a coffee cup.
Hi.
I'm a coffee cup. Yeah, okay.
It's like a DJ.
Yeah, well, that's because you're a modern child. I'm old school.